Have you ever noticed that no matter how hard you try, how many concessions you make, or how much you love a narcissist, they always treat you like someone less worthy? As if your voice doesn't count, your emotions are exaggerated, and your dignity is negotiable. This isn't by chance. It's a precisely planned control strategy. Today, you'll discover 5 revolutionary attitudes that will force even the most toxic narcissist to respect you. Not through fighting, but through psychological awareness and emotional strength that you may not have known you possessed. The last strategy might forever change the way you relate to this type of person. Most people think you earn a narcissist's respect by being nicer, more accommodating to their demands. This is the biggest mistake. A narcissist only respects what they cannot control. And it's not your fault that so many people feel trapped in such relationships. Respect isn't just politeness or good manners. It's emotional recognition of your existence, your worth as a person, and your boundaries. It's the foundation on which we build our self-esteem, our decisions, and even our mental health. Various studies in affective neuroscience have shown that living in environments where we are constantly invalidated, where our voice doesn't count, and where boundaries are crossed, triggers a chronic stress response in the brain. Dr. Bruce Perry explains that this can alter the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, permanently increasing cortisol and generating states of anxiety, insomnia, fatigue, and even autoimmune or cardiovascular diseases. In other words, the lack of lasting respect doesn't just hurt emotionally. The body and soul get sick from it, and the damage intensifies when it comes from someone who supposedly loves us. Because when the one who should care for us minimizes us, the confusion is brutal. The brain no longer knows whether to protect or attach. This creates a cycle of suffering where you repeatedly ask yourself if the problem lies within you, while in reality, you're losing respect for yourself, not realizing that respect begins from within. And when you recover it, the world begins to read you differently, even the narcissist. What part of the United States are you watching us from? Because what you're about to hear will change your life forever. There's a moment in every relationship with a narcissist when you realize something deeply painful. That it doesn't matter how much you explain, how hard you try, how much you beg for understanding. The other person simply doesn't want to understand you. And not because they can't, but because understanding you would force them to look at themselves, and that's what they fear most. Strategic silence is born from this personal, emotional turning point. It's a conscious act of allowing yourself to become exhausted in monologues that only feed the other person's control. This isn't silence from fear, it's silence from dignity. The narcissist feeds off your reactions, and every word you say becomes a tool for manipulation. All attempts to explain something turn into new accusations, and every tear you shed is used as proof that you're unstable. That's why, when you choose not to respond to an attack, not to justify decisions, not to enter the guilt game, you break the circuit that maintains manipulation. It's like cutting off the emotional oxygen supply to someone who lives off conflict. Neurobiologically, this has a clear explanation. When we stop reacting, we activate our prefrontal cortex, the rational and strategic part of the brain, and prevent the emotional amygdala from taking control. The narcissist, meanwhile, continues, operating from their own limbic system, seeking dopamine peaks through drama. And your silence reduces the stimulus intensity, deactivates intermittent reinforcement, and takes away their reward for provocation. As clinical psychologist Ramani Durvasula explains, when there's no more fuel, the fire goes out on its own. But how much does it cost us to remain silent when we feel we're being treated unfairly? How do we resist the temptation to explain ourselves one more time, to finally be understood? The key is understanding that you're not seeking justice. You're withdrawing from an emotional war without truce. Therefore, not reacting doesn't make you weak. It liberates you from manipulation. Because when you don't dance to the narcissist's rhythm, they lose control over the compass. And that's where respect begins. After years of pleasing, apologizing, and feeling guilty for putting your needs first, comes a moment when you understand a liberating truth. You don't have to justify your no for it to be valid. With a narcissist, this simple act becomes an emotional revolution because few things destabilize someone who lives off control, like confronting a person who establishes firm boundaries and doesn't break down in the process. The narcissist interprets your boundaries as an attack, not because they really are, but because they challenge their sense of omnipotence. They're used to you giving in, explaining why, negotiating your peace with this and that to avoid their anger. So when you say, "I can't, I don't want to," or simply "this far," and you do it without drama, without fear, and without giving endless explanations, you break the dynamic that gives them power, because you're no longer playing their emotional and dirty game. You're taking care of your mental health. From a psychological perspective, this is understood as emotional self-affirmation, a fundamental pillar of healthy self-esteem. According to Dr. Brené Brown, clarity is kindness. Saying no with firmness, without aggression or guilt, is one of the most honest and healthiest forms of relating to people. At the same time, by doing this, you activate neural circuits that strengthen your identity, your decision-making ability, and your autonomy. In neurobiological terms, the act of establishing boundaries strengthens your internal reward system and reduces emotional dependence on the other person. But of course, fear appears and you start thinking, what if they get angry? What if they reject me? What if they punish me with their silence? This "what if" has a direct impact on your thoughts. But the question isn't what will happen if you say no, but what happens to you every time you say yes when you really wanted to say no. Because every time you cross your own boundaries out of fear of losing the other person, you lose yourself. And here lies the key. The narcissist may not want to respect you, but they can't force you to disrespect yourself. When your boundaries are clear, calm, and consistent, you send a more powerful message than any scream. I respect myself, even if you don't. Even if they don't admit it, this throws them off balance, unsettles and irritates them, because manipulation stops working and personality begins to emerge, the one that doesn't scream, but feels. And this leads us to the third strategy that will definitively change the game. There's something deeply disturbing for a narcissist when they try to provoke you and you don't react. And that's when they throw out irony, indirect comments, or offensive phrases, and you don't get caught. When instead of defending yourself or screaming, you choose silence, calm, or simply walk away. Because this reaction, or rather, this lack of reaction, breaks the cycle of emotional control they so need to feel. The narcissist often provokes to destabilize you. They want to see you cry, scream, endlessly apologize, because while you're in chaos, they feel in control. It's a subtle way, and sometimes a very direct way of maintaining power. They throw bait disguised as jokes, accuse you of things you didn't do, say what you're saying is wrong, or simply ignore you just when you need support most. And if you react emotionally, the wheel strengthens. But if you don't, something in their structure breaks. Neurobiologically, this is explained by the concept of emotional regulation. Dr. Lisa Feldman Barrett showed that the brain doesn't react to what happens, but to how it interprets what happens. This means you have the power to choose whether provocation catches you or not. Therefore, every time you choose not to enter a discussion designed to destroy you, the brain strengthens prefrontal cortex connections, where self-control, clarity, and inner peace reside. And this isn't your mission. It's emotional intelligence at its finest. And although it's difficult at first because your whole body screams to defend itself, learning not to react to this game completely changes the dynamic, because the narcissist needs reactions to survive emotionally. But when you choose calm, You remove the scene where they were always the protagonist, but now they have nothing to play with and start to get frustrated, even confused. So it's not about ignoring them out of fear, it's about responding from your center, not from your wound. To understand that sometimes true power doesn't lie in having the last word, but in not needing it. Because when they don't drag you into their chaos, you show that you no longer live there. And for someone who needs to control your emotional world, this is a quiet but crushing defeat. But what happens when the narcissist sees that their old tactics stop working? Prepare yourself for what you're about to hear. Few things are more uncomfortable for a narcissist than seeing that you're moving forward without their approval, without their presence, without asking for permission. Seeing that you're flourishing, that you're healing, that you're smiling, that you're making plans again and recovering your light. Because although they'll never say it openly, the narcissist needs to feel indispensable in your life. And when you show that you can move forward without them, it's like showing them they no longer have power over you. And this deeply destabilizes them. This discomfort transforms into quiet anger when you share a photo where you look good, when you mention an achievement, when you speak with confidence, or simply act with calm or tranquility. Because their greatest fear isn't your happiness, it's your emotional autonomy. Because they can't stand seeing someone who was their emotional prey now walking free with a stronger heart and clearer boundaries. Because in their language, this means they failed to control you. Psychology explains this through the concept of narcissistic supply, the constant need to be admired and needed. Others' success, especially if it comes from someone who was once vulnerable to them, represents a direct threat to their fragile ego. And Dr. Ramani Durvasula, an expert in narcissism, explains that when the narcissist sees you healing, they may feel humiliated, even if they never admit it. Because their identity is based on the illusion that you're not worth as much without them. And here, many victims stop because they're afraid of irritating the narcissist. They feel guilty showing their progress or doubt whether they deserve to shine. But here you must remember that your life isn't an emotional battlefield to avoid hurting sensitivities. You don't have to apologize for rebuilding yourself or make yourself small so others don't feel less. Because when you choose to move forward, when you focus on yourself and your own growth, you send a quiet but powerful message: my life belongs to me. And this not only makes the narcissist feel uncomfortable, but also returns the dignity you should never have lost. But true power is revealed in the next strategy, which may be the hardest to master. There's a crucial moment in the process of liberating yourself from a narcissist. That moment when for the first time you don't react. Like before, you no longer respond immediately, don't justify every step, don't beg, don't explode, don't enter their emotional game. You simply remain silent or respond with disarming calm. And this small, seemingly simple gesture has a crushing impact on the narcissist because it breaks the emotional script they always used to control you. Because for a long time, they fed off your reactions, your tears, your anger, your fear, your need to explain everything. And every response you gave was a hook that reinforced their power. But when you suddenly stop dancing this toxic dance, when you no longer let yourself be caught by provocation, the narcissist stands before a mirror that doesn't respond. And this throws them off balance because they don't know how to deal with someone who no longer allows their emotions to be manipulated. This change can be explained through stress axis deactivation and emotional self-regulation. When the victim begins to heal, the limbic system, especially the amygdala that responds to fear and threat, begins to deactivate because there's no automatic reactivity. And in its place appears a more conscious and focused response. This is the beginning of inner freedom that doesn't need to scream to feel strong. And for the narcissist, this is deeply frustrating because emotional control was their main weapon. And if they can no longer change you, they can't use you. If you no longer lose control, they lose power. Therefore, when you choose not to react like before, you're not only protecting your peace and psychological well-being, you're doing something much deeper. You're closing the door to the manipulator's game. So remember that sometimes the most powerful thing isn't speaking, it's not reacting. Because silence, when it's born from awareness, isn't emptiness, it's a boundary. And that boundary is the clearest signal that their control is over. But there's still one more strategy that may be the hardest, but also the most effective. Prepare yourself for what might completely change your life. If there comes a moment when there are no real changes, when after so much emotional exhaustion, you realize that your life began revolving exclusively around how the other person reacts, to what you say and don't say, whether they'll be in a good mood today, whether they'll disappear tomorrow without warning and without notifying you. Your energy, your decisions, and even your mood are organized around the narcissist, as if they were the sun when they're really consuming you like a black hole. This is the point where you must give yourself permission to rebuild your life as proper shelter, not as an emotional war trench. When you're with a narcissist, you often live trying to predict their behavior, gain their validation, or avoid rejection. You adapt so much that you forget what you want, what you like, and what you dream of. It's like building a house on constantly shifting ground. No matter how much effort you put in, nothing will hold. But there's something deeply liberating when you decide to stop revolving around this and start building from within. A project, passion, routine that doesn't depend on their approval, not to punish them, but to return to yourself. Neurobiologically, this change means exiting a state of emotional hypervigilance, dominated by the amygdala, the brain's fear center, and activating the prefrontal cortex, the part that allows you to make decisions with calm, purpose, and planning. Rebuilding your life this way is more than a symbolic act. It's concrete action that restores your brain's ability to imagine a future. Clinical psychologist Janina Fisher talks about how chronic interpersonal trauma can make us live attached to another person, as if we existed only in function of the bond, even when it's harmful. But there's life beyond toxic bonding. What if you started today with one small action? Let it be just for you. A walk without taking your phone, that forgotten book, writing down a dream you had archived. These are gestures that seem small, but they're like bricks with which you rebuild your shelter. And you don't have to immediately run away from everything, but stop centering your world around someone who doesn't know how to care for yours. Because it's not your mission to save those who don't want to be saved. Your mission is to return to yourself. And when you do this, the narcissist feels it. They notice you're no longer dancing to their rhythm. Your life has its own rhythm. And that's precisely what destabilizes. But beyond that, you discover something greater, that you don't have to be part of their storm to deserve peace. Your inner world, when it's nourished by boundaries of self-love and purpose, becomes a sacred place where not everyone enters anymore, much less everyone who comes only to destroy. But what happens when all these strategies start working? The last truth might be the most shocking. Maybe for a long time, we were told that respect is begged for, that you need to do more, be less, or change who you are to be understood. But today I want to tell you something with all the strength of my soul. Respect isn't begged for, it's embodied. It becomes part of you when you decide to heal, establish boundaries, and recover your inner voice. It doesn't matter how much they manipulated, silenced, or questioned you. You still have time to recover your center and remember who you are. Each of these strategies not only helps you make the narcissist respect you, but restores something deeper to you, self-respect, which you should never have lost. And when you truly respect yourself, something changes in your gaze, your posture, your decisions, and others feel it, even those who don't want to acknowledge it. Freud himself said that the unconscious often knows more than consciousness. The narcissist may consciously refuse you respect, but their unconscious recognizes strength when it sees it. When your boundaries are clear, your calm is authentic, and your dignity is unshaken. You send energy that cannot be ignored. This isn't arrogance, it's healthy self-awareness. It's the difference between begging for attention and emanating presence. The narcissist is used to people who break under pressure, who negotiate their worth, who live in constant fear of rejection. But when they meet someone who has clear boundaries and doesn't break down, their strategy stops working, and here begins true respect, not because the narcissist suddenly becomes a better person, but because they can no longer play their old games. They're forced to interact with you on different terms. Sometimes this respect comes in the form of frustration, sometimes in the form of surprise, and sometimes in the form of quiet recognition. But it always comes because even the most toxic person recognizes strength when it's authentic. But remember, these strategies aren't meant to fix the narcissist, they're meant to recover you, and this leads us to the ultimate truth. The truth is that the narcissist may never change into the person you need. They may never become the partner, parent, or friend you dreamed of. But you can change into a person who doesn't need their approval to feel worthy. These 5 strategies: strategic silence, saying no without explanation, not entering provocations, showing you can move forward and not reacting like before. These aren't manipulation tactics. They're tools for recovering your authenticity. When you master these skills, something magical happens. You stop living in the narcissist's reactive orbit and start living from your own center. Your decisions stop being reactions to their behavior and become choices based on your values. And then something unexpected happens. The narcissist, who was used to controlling you through chaos, suddenly faces someone they can't destabilize. Your calm becomes their frustration. Your clarity becomes their confusion. Your strength becomes their powerlessness. This doesn't mean they'll become better people. It means they can no longer use their old strategies against you, and this forces them to respect, even if they don't want to admit it. Freud taught us that our greatest prisons are psychological, but the greatest liberation is too. When you free yourself from the need for the narcissist's approval, when you stop negotiating your worth with someone who lacks the ability to appreciate it, you discover something amazing. You discover that you always had within you the strength you were seeking outside, that the respect you begged from others lived in you all the time, that the love you needed to feel complete was already in your heart. And when you truly embody that self-respect, when you live from that place of inner dignity, the world changes around you. Not because you're trying to control others, but because you've stopped allowing others to control you. The narcissist may still try their old games, but they don't work on someone who knows their worth. They may still throw provocations, but they don't reach someone who lives in their own peace. And the greatest irony is that when you stop needing their respect, you often finally receive it. Not because they changed, but because they have no other choice. When they can't control you, they must respect you. Your journey doesn't end with forcing the narcissist to respect you. It begins with recovering respect for yourself. And that, my friend, is the beginning of real life. Remember, you are valuable not because someone sees you that way, but because you exist. Your worth is not negotiable, your dignity is not optional, and your peace is not a luxury. It's your fundamental right. When you understand this and begin to live this way, the whole world opens up before you. Even the narcissist, against their will have to acknowledge it.